A royal scandal is unfolding like never before. If you enjoy uncovering shocking stories from within the palace walls, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. It all began quietly behind closed doors with murmurs about missing jewels following Queen Elizabeth II's passing. Initially, the rumors were brushed off as mere speculation, but soon, undeniable signs began to surface. The most explosive moment came when Queen Camilla allegedly listed one of Elizabeth's most prized treasures, a historic diamond tiara valued at over $15 million in a private auction. The revelation sent shockwaves through those closest to the late queen, especially her daughter, Princess Anne. What stunned many even further was that this wasn't the first instance of such behavior. Reports suggested Camilla had discreetly sold off other jewels in the past, slipping them into private auctions under assumed ownership, pocketing untold sums while keeping the entire affair hidden from public scrutiny. For Anne, who guarded her mother's legacy with fierce devotion, this was more than betrayal. It was an affront to the Queen's memory. The missing heirlooms only deepened the growing suspicion. Items like the Victorian diamond brooch, a sapphire necklace once worn at state banquets, an emerald choker tied to past monarchs, and even Diana's iconic pearls, all mysteriously vanished after Elizabeth's death. Each piece held not only immense financial worth, but also deep historical and emotional significance. Their disappearance raised one alarming question. Where were they going, and who was truly benefiting? Then came the whistleblower. An insider revealed that these treasures weren't lost at all. They were hidden. According to testimony, Camilla had stored them in a private vault at her Wiltshire estate, Raymill House, far removed from official royal records and accountability. The revelation was nothing short of damning, pointing to a deliberate effort to conceal some of the crown's most treasured possessions. This was the spark Anne needed. Her resolve shifted from quiet suspicion to decisive action, setting the stage for a confrontation that would shake the monarchy to its very core. Anne's investigation was nothing short of meticulous. Renowned for her no-nonsense approach, she discreetly gathered a small circle of trusted allies. Among them were experienced royal protection officers who had once guarded the late queen herself. Together, they pieced together a trail of evidence: photographs of the missing jewels, suspicious delivery records, and testimonies from staff who had witnessed packages being quietly moved into Raymill House under Camilla's supervision. Every lead pointed to one undeniable conclusion: the heirlooms hadn't been misplaced or lost to time. They had been deliberately removed from royal custody. Anne understood the gravity of her mission. These jewels weren't merely valuable. They represented continuity, duty, and the unbroken royal lineage stretching back through centuries. Their disappearance wasn't just a scandal. It risked tarnishing Elizabeth's legacy forever. The deeper Anne delved, the more unsettling the pattern became. Several auctions across Europe and the Middle East featured anonymous sellers offering rare jewels strikingly similar to those in the royal archives. Expert jewelers quietly confirmed what Anne already feared. Some of the most treasured pieces had been discreetly sold, their origins wiped clean by skillful intermediaries. Though Camilla's name never appeared on any documentation, the timing of the sales aligned perfectly with the jewels' disappearance from Windsor and Buckingham inventories, and Tew also uncovered that several staff members who had tried to voice concerns were suddenly dismissed or coerced into silence. One former butler, speaking in confidence, recalled being instructed to transport special items late at night from Clarence House to Raymill, under strict orders never to ask questions. Another member of the household, staff recalled seeing Diana's unmistakable pearl bracelet, once a wedding gift from the Spencer family, while being locked away in a velvet-lined case destined for the estate. These testimonies painted a picture that was impossible to ignore. Still, Anne knew that her word alone would never be enough to challenge the reigning queen. If she were to make her move, she needed irrefutable proof, and the perfect moment to deliver it. She began compiling everything into a meticulously documented dossier, each piece of evidence placed in precise chronological order. What she uncovered made her both furious and determined. She was preparing to confront Camilla head-on, and she would not retreat until the truth came to light. That confrontation was destined to erupt, not in secrecy, but in the very heart of the royal circle, where silence could no longer conceal the truth. The tension reached its peak at Clarence House, where Princess Anne decided it was time to act. She arrived with her dossier in hand, every detail neatly organized. Photographs of the jewels, statements from household staff, shipping records, and even auction catalogs mirroring the missing heirlooms. Anne was not there to speculate. She was there to accuse. In a private sitting room, Anne confronted Camilla directly. Her words were sharp, unwavering, and impossible to dismiss. She laid out the evidence piece by piece, building her case like a prosecutor in court. The message was clear: return Queen Elizabeth's jewels, or Anne would go public and let the world see the truth for itself. Those present described the atmosphere as glacial. Anne's fury barely contained, while Camilla struggled to maintain her composure behind a strained smile. For Camilla, the ultimatum was a devastating blow. If Anne carried out her threat, the fallout would extend far beyond mere embarrassment. The jewels symbolized not only immense wealth but trust, and their disappearance was now intertwined with Camilla's reputation as queen. To lose them in a public scandal could inflict lasting damage on her, standing within the royal family and the nation at large. But rather than yielding, Camilla launched a counter-offensive. Behind closed doors, she turned to King Charles, portraying Anne as unstable, overly emotional, and even a potential threat to the stability of the monarchy. Camilla's version of events cast herself as the victim of a vindictive sister-in-law, insisting that Anne's paranoia was creating unnecessary divisions within the royal family. Some insiders whispered that Camilla had even begun drafting plans to discreetly reduce Anne's royal engagements, hoping to sideline her and diminish her influence before the confrontation could spread any further. But Anne was not so easily silenced. Just as tensions reached their breaking point, a new piece of evidence emerged, one that shifted the balance entirely in Anne's favor. Among Elizabeth's personal papers, tucked safely away at Balmoral, was a sealed letter written by the late queen herself. The letter explicitly named Anne as the official guardian of her jewels, entrusting her with the duty of safeguarding them for future generations. Even more damning was Elizabeth's warning to Camilla, urging her not to misuse or claim the heirlooms as her own. The discovery of this letter struck like a thunderclap. Suddenly, Anne was no longer acting on suspicion. She was carrying out her mother's final wish. With the Queen's words behind her, Anne now held undeniable moral authority, one that even Camilla could not easily twist or erase. From that moment, the dispute over the jewels evolved from a private rift into something far greater, setting the stage for a scandal that would soon erupt beyond palace walls. The controversy could no longer be contained. Word of the missing heirlooms and the late Queen's sealed letter began to leak, first whispered by palace insiders, then seized upon by reporters who sensed a story too monumental to ignore. Within days, headlines around the world blazed with the revelation. Priceless royal jewels were missing, and Queen Camilla stood accused of concealing them. The backlash was swift and severe. The public, already deeply protective of royal tradition and symbolism, reacted with outrage. These jewels were not mere ornaments. They were fragments of history itself. Worn by Queen Elizabeth during coronations, state visits, and defining moments of national unity, their disappearance struck a profound chord, leaving many to question how such treasures could vanish under Camilla's watch. Calls for transparency grew louder with each passing day, as pressure mounted for a full accounting of the royal collection. Then, an unexpected voice entered the storm: Prince Harry. From across the ocean, he released letters written by his late mother, Princess Diana. Among them was a passage confirming that Diana's pearl bracelet, an intimate and deeply personal heirloom, was now hidden within Camilla's private vault. The revelation didn't just intensify. The scandal, it tied Camilla's alleged actions to one of the most beloved figures in modern royal history. Diana's words carried immense weight, and Harry's decision to unveil them poured fuel on an already blazing fire. Suddenly, the scandal was no longer just about missing jewels. It had become a story of trust, legacy, and betrayal. International media quickly framed the saga as a battle for the very soul of the monarchy. Was the crown protecting its past, or was it crumbling from within? Anne's determination to uphold Elizabeth's legacy was now echoed by millions who felt the loss personally, as though a piece of history itself had been stolen from them. Meanwhile, inside the palace, Camilla's inner circle began to shrink. Advisors who had once staunchly defended her grew uneasy, unwilling to be linked to the escalating disaster. The pressure weighed heavily on Charles, too. Caught between his sister's irrefutable evidence and his wife's increasingly desperate denials. Behind every closed door, tempers flared, arguments over loyalty, legacy, and survival tearing through the royal corridors. The scandal had reached a point of no return. Anne knew that the time for diplomacy was over. The truth had to be revealed, and there was no setting more fitting than the royal family's summer retreat at Balmoral Castle. It was there, on the very ground so deeply tied to Elizabeth's memory, that Anne prepared to make her final move. At Balmoral Castle, the weight of history lingered heavily in the air. The vast estate had always been Elizabeth's sanctuary, a place of reflection, solitude, and quiet strength. Now it would serve as the stage for a reckoning that could no longer be postponed. Princess Anne arrived armed with every piece of evidence she had gathered: the photographs, the testimonies, the auction records, and most importantly, her mother's sealed letter naming her the guardian of the royal jewels. The royal family assembled in a private chamber, a gathering that many would later describe as unbearably tense. Camilla sat rigid, her composure visibly cracking, while Charles shifted uneasily, torn between loyalty to his wife and his sister. Anne spoke with calm but unyielding authority, presenting her case with precision. Each piece of evidence stacked higher until the truth became impossible to deny. For hours, the confrontation played out. Camilla denied, deflected, and even attempted to downplay the missing heirlooms as mere errors in record-keeping. But Anne's case was airtight. Staff testimonies directly contradicted Camilla's claims. Auction records revealed exact matches to jewels last seen in Elizabeth's possession. And the late Queen's letter stood as a final, irrefutable verdict. When Anne finished, silence filled the room. Everyone present understood the truth. Camilla had taken what was never hers to claim. These jewels were not simply adornments. They were threads woven into the very fabric of the monarchy. And Elizabeth's wish was unmistakable. They were to be safeguarded, preserved, and passed down, not hidden or sold. At last, Camilla relented. Under the crushing weight of evidence and the moral power of Elizabeth's final words, she agreed to return the jewels. The Victorian diamond brooch, the sapphire necklace, the emerald choker, Diana's pearls, and countless other treasures were to be restored to the royal collection, but the damage had already been done. The jewels might return, but trust would not. Anne's victory came at a heavy cost. The fracture within the family was permanent. Camilla's image, already fragile, was left in ruins before the eyes of the world. For Anne, however, the confrontation had never been about power. It was about duty, honoring her mother's final wish and ensuring the legacy of the crown remained protected for generations to come. In the end, Balmoral became both a place of reckoning and resolution. The jewels were returned to their rightful home, but the memory of how close they came to being lost forever would haunt the monarchy for years to come. Anne had stood her ground, and history would remember her as the one who safeguarded Elizabeth's treasures when they were most in danger. The storm surrounding the jewels didn't truly end at Balmoral. It merely changed form. The treasures themselves were restored to the royal vaults, back where they belonged, yet the wounds left behind remained raw and visible to all who followed the saga. For the monarchy, an institution built on quiet dignity and seamless continuity, this scandal marked a scar that could not easily be concealed. Every piece returned carried with it a haunting story. The Victorian diamond brooch, once proudly pinned to Elizabeth's gown at historic banquets, had narrowly escaped being sold to anonymous collectors. The sapphire necklace, gleaming with centuries of memory, was almost lost to history. The emerald choker, long tied to past queens and preserved as a link between generations, had been hidden away in a private vault instead of resting within the royal archives where it rightfully belonged. And perhaps most painful of all were Diana's pearls, once a symbol of grace, love, and tragedy, now forever tainted by their role in Camilla's alleged schemes. The jewels had been returned, but they were no longer unblemished. They had been marked by secrecy and betrayal. Princess Anne, however, remained steadfast. For her, the outcome was a victory, though one that came at great emotional cost. She had stood alone when no one else dared to confront Camilla. She had gathered the evidence, faced deception head-on, and placed her mother's legacy above family unity. The sealed letter from Elizabeth had been her compass throughout the entire ordeal. A clear and undeniable directive stated that the jewels were to be safeguarded by Anne herself. When she held that letter in her hand, it was more than paper and ink. It was her mother's voice guiding her, reminding her of the duty that outlived the Queen's reign. But fulfilling that duty came with a cost. The confrontation at Balmoral left fractures that could never truly be mended. Trust between Anne and Camilla was shattered beyond repair, and the rest of the family were forced either to take sides or remain silent, which, in itself, spoke volumes. Even Charles, torn between loyalty to his sister and devotion to his wife, could not escape the weight of the scandal. His hesitation and reliance on Camilla's version of events left one question lingering. How much had he really known, and how much had he chosen not to see? For Camilla, the fallout was devastating. Though she retained her position beside Charles, her public image was irreparably damaged. The revelations cast her not as a custodian of history, but as someone who sought to profit from it. Persistent whispers about her secret vault at Raymill House refused to fade, and her earlier attempts to portray Anne as unstable were now seen, in hindsight, as calculated manipulation. The jewels had been returned, yet suspicion clung to her like a shadow over every public appearance she made. Allies who once stood by her began to drift away, unwilling to be tainted by association with the scandal. Meanwhile, the press and public transformed the affair into something far greater than jewels. It became a debate about trust, honor, and the very role of the monarchy in safeguarding history. The idea that heirlooms so central to Britain's heritage could be hidden away for personal benefit struck many as unthinkable. International outlets framed it as a cautionary tale, a reminder of how legacy can be fractured from within. Historians and curators expressed relief that the treasures were ultimately preserved, yet alarm that such a situation had arisen at all. And then there was Diana's voice, echoing from beyond. Through Harry's release of her letters, the scandal took on an even deeper, more emotional resonance. The confirmation that Diana's pearl bracelet, so personal, so symbolic, had been concealed within Camilla's vault brought the matter out of royal politics and into the heart of the public. Diana's words, combined with Anne's defiance, transformed the saga from an aristocratic quarrel into a moral battle about respect, remembrance, and betrayal. In the end, the jewels were safe. Once again, they rested within the royal vaults, preserved for future generations. But their story had been changed forever. They were no longer silent ornaments. They had become witnesses to a bitter conflict that shook the royal family to its core. Each time they are worn in years to come, the memory of their near loss will linger, a quiet reminder of the storm that almost consumed them. The true legacy of this scandal lay not in the diamonds or pearls themselves, but in the people who fought for them. Anne proved herself to be the guardian her mother always believed she was, steadfast in her loyalty to Elizabeth's memory. Camilla, despite returning the jewels, was left with a reputation forever marked by suspicion. And the monarchy itself was forced to confront a painful truth: that history can be stolen not by outsiders, but from within, and that its greatest treasures rely not merely on vaults and locks, but on the integrity of those entrusted to protect them. At Balmoral, Elizabeth's presence was felt in every corner of the confrontation. Her letter, her legacy, and her memory served as the ultimate verdict. In the end, her voice spoke louder than Camilla's denials, louder than the headlines, and louder than the divisions within the family. Anne carried that voice forward, ensuring that amid the turmoil, the Queen's will was honored. The jewels remain intact, the monarchy endures, yet the story of how close they came to being lost will not fade. It stands as a chapter that reminds the world that even within the most gilded halls, truth always finds its way to the surface. And when it does, it cannot be ignored.